Hey there, welcome to the Graced Health Podcast, your diet culture-free source for aging strong in your physical, mental, and spiritual health. My name is Amy Connell. I'm a weight-neutral certified personal trainer and intuitive eating-focused nutrition coach who loves walks with friends, chocolate, and Jesus. This is the place for women over 40 who are looking to grow strong as they age and nourish their body, mind, and spirit. I'm so glad you're here. If you are a new listener, first of all, welcome. And if you want to learn more about this podcast, go check out season 19 starting January 9th, 2024, and then listen to the episode 30 plus non-gym ways to improve your health. You'll find the free download that goes with that episode in today's show notes. Let's dive into today's episode. Hey everyone. Oh my goodness, you're in for a treat today. I'm so glad you're here. Today we are talking about our calling and burnout and regulation of our nervous system, all things I know that we are also interested in. For several years, the intro to this podcast included something like, your eating, movement, and body don't have to be perfect. You just need to be able to do what you're called to do. I said this over and over and over. And even though I don't say it in the intro, nothing has changed. I still 100% believe that. But what happens when we become overwhelmed by that very calling, when we become exhausted by it, when the purpose we feel drawn to do becomes the source of our exhaustion? Today's conversation touches on something I think a lot of us are experiencing, and that is burnout from living out our calling. We know God wants us doing this, and yet we're kind of tired. And if you're feeling this way, I want you to know you are not alone. There is at least one other person out there who has felt the way that you do, and she's talking to you right now. I've been there, especially in this online space where there's always another project, another idea, another opportunity that I'm like, oh, well, I should do that. My guest today is Janice McWilliams, a psychotherapist and spiritual director whose work focuses on empowering people to live out their calling without burning out. What I love about Janice's approach is just how practical it is. She's not suggesting that we need to completely overhaul our lives or take expensive weekend retreats to practice that self-care. Instead, she offers something much more sustainable in what she calls soul restoring rhythms that we can just integrate into our daily lives. We've had some conversations recently about our nervous system regulation, particularly with Sherry Shaban. So if you want to hear more about that, you can go back and listen to her episode. But for those of you focusing on that or wanting to learn more about it, I think you will really appreciate Janice's hormone soup metaphor. It's just a beautiful way of understanding how our daily choices affect our stress hormones and how we can intentionally create balance throughout our day. I just found myself nodding along with so many of Janice's insights. I think you will too. Whether you are feeling overwhelmed by your calling, struggling to find balance in your busy life, or just looking for some practical ways to take care of yourself amidst the chaos of living, I invite you to listen in as Janice and I explore what it means to find sustainable, soul-restoring rhythms in our everyday lives. The link to Janice's book, Restore My Soul, Reimagining Self-Care for a Sustainable Life, is in the show notes. And also, if you are in ministry, she does have an online course specifically for ministry leaders. The link to that is also in the show notes. Okay, let's dive into my conversation with Janice McWilliams. Hey, Janice, I'm so glad you're here.
I'm glad to be here.
So I don't know if you know this about me or not, but by the time this comes out, we will be celebrating almost 4 years of the Graced Health podcast. And
Wow.
For over 3 of them, yeah, crazy,
Congratulations.
right? Yeah, it has been a journey and a great one. At the beginning of each episode, for probably 3+ years, I would say something about your eating, movement, and body don't need to be perfect. They just need to be able to do what they're called to do. We talk a lot about calling. We talk a lot about purpose. You're here today to guide us through that point that so many of us who are living out our calling feel at one time or another when we're burned out from our calling. So what happens when we become overwhelmed and fatigued and just burned out from doing what God wants us to do?
Oh, yes. We're talking squarely in the middle of what I'm passionate about because I want to be about empowering people to live out their calling without burning out. First of all, I think it is not Jesus' desire or heart that anyone burn out following after him. And so I think that when we find ourselves either burned out or moving towards feeling burned out, we could do a few things that would really help us. One would be a pretty rigorous examination of, are we doing what's ours to do? Or are we picking up more than is what we have been called to do? That process can be really helped by bringing in our community around us to help us think through all of that. I have to say that no matter where people are in that process, and I find this with clients, I'm a psychotherapist and spiritual director, so I work with people on these kinds of things all the time. There always comes a time in our sessions when we pivot the conversation and I ask them, how can you start feeling better tomorrow? What can you do now that will have an impact immediately? That's where we start talking about how do you start living really meaningful self-care in the days of your, the moments, hours, and days of your life so that your days are more manageable. Because a lot of times what people think is my life is not really sustainable, so I'm going to practice some self-care. I hear people talking about this all the time. And a lot of times what people do when they're going to practice self-care is what I call Barbie-Style self-care. I call it Barbie-Style self-care because Mattel came out with a line of self-care Barbies, which cracks me up and delights me to no end. But these self-care Barbies.
Let me guess. Manicure Barbie, pet
All day
Barbie,
Barbie,
bathtub.
breathe
Yeah.
with me, meditation Barbie. Oh, yeah, all the things. What I think these Barbies do is they kind of perpetuate this idea that self-care is something you stop your unsustainable life to do that involves kind of pampering. It's probably super expensive. You're going to need childcare or like a whole weekend to do it. And then when you're finished, and that's, and then you do your spa day or what have you. And then when you're finished, you just resume your unsustainable life again. This kind of idea about self-care, I think, really gets us in trouble because, those stops to do something like that are great. But what I really want people to think about is to craft a life that is sustainable. And then those experiences like a spa day or a retreat day can really be about replenishment and not just recovery, not just what you have to do to survive, but to actually bring you into a better place, a more empowered place so that you can be living into your calling from a place of not deficit, but steadiness and evenness and fulfilledness and just soul-filledness. That's where I feel like crafting a plan to start living each and every day a bit differently, it does not have to be completely overwhelming. That's what I want to start with. The best of self-care is lived in the moments and hours of your days, and it is eminently doable. Any idea that self-care has to mean quitting everything extra or starting a new exercise routine that's like 2 hours a day or completely overhauling everything about your life, these things get people in trouble because they become overwhelming to implement. So I'm really about crafting a plan that's eminently doable that you can start right away.
One of the things I wrote when you were talking is I kind of combined some things, but that self-care is not a pause to resume unsustainable living.
Right.
Yeah, I like that. So let's dig into self-care some because there are a lot of different ways that people approach this. And the Barbie way is one.
Mm-hmm.
Personally, I'm not a manicure and pedicure person. I don't want to take the time to be in a bath. That is not my gig.
Yeah.
But I have my own things as well, and I've been trying to adjust it. So I would love for you to kind of walk us through what are some great ways to integrate self-care in a sustainable way? And then maybe what are some ways that we should ask ourselves if these are just pauses to go straight back to the unsustainable living?
Yeah. I want to start answering this question with a metaphor that I think has been really rich for me and something I've used with a lot of my clients. It's the metaphor, it's called hormone soup. This came to me when I was recollecting a time when one of my friends made tortilla soup and I was a guest eating this soup. I took a bite and I was like, oh, this has got a lot of kick. I took another bite and I thought, Janice isn't going to be able to eat this soup. You know, it was so spicy. I was like on fire.
Yeah.
And my friend, thankfully, like she spoke up and said, something is wrong. We checked the recipe and sure enough, she had put a tablespoon of cayenne in this.
Oh my goodness.
I know that called for a teaspoon, right? We've all done this. We laughed. But the thing, you know, people who are cooks can tell you that you don't necessarily have to throw out a soup like that. You can put in things that will mellow it out and make it really palatable. You can put brown sugar in there or yogurt or potatoes, stuff that will mellow out the soup. As I was in my training to be a counselor, we're learning about the impact of stress hormone on the body versus happy hormone. You want some stress hormone, but not too much. You want some cayenne, like maybe a teaspoon. You don't want a tablespoon, right? Or the soup isn't going to taste okay. So when I was thinking about if we consider our bodies to be a vat of soup we're cooking, and we have the ingredients we have are just like stress hormone and happy hormone. Every day you're cooking up this soup and you're going to have some stress hormone in there because life happens and brings you some stress hormone. In some seasons of your life, you're going to have a lot of stress hormone just because that's the way life is. You have seasons of really intense stress. You don't necessarily have to throw out, you know, quote unquote, the soup to make your soup taste okay. You can put things into it that function like the brown sugar and potatoes to mellow it out and make it a really palatable soup throughout the whole day. This is what I like to help my clients think about. Okay, so your day is plugging along and there might be a number of things that are dumping some stress hormone into your soup. What can you do at the beginning, middle, and end of your day that would represent an additional dump of happy hormone in there? I craft plans with people according to what makes sense for them. One of the things we start with is thinking about a concept I call taking a better break. A lot of people will I'll say, do you take any breaks at work? And they're like, oh yeah, sure. I take a break. And I'm like, what do you do on your break? And they inevitably tell me, oh, I pick up my phone, check my email, check my socials, and check the news headlines. If that is your break, then you are probably dumping a good bit of stress hormone into your body during that break because the phone is bringing you some measure of stress. And so when we talk about a better break, then we talk about, okay, what would be really eminently doable and enjoyable for you that you'd be willing to do instead of checking that phone? People will come up with all kinds of ideas. Like, I'm going to read midday prayers from the Book of Common Prayer, or I'm going to sip a cup of tea and look out the window. I'm going to take a quick walk around the block. Some people will just say, I'm going to listen to worship music instead of listening to the news or something like that. But they're doing something intentional that will bring them kind of an opposite energy, you know, bring in that wonderful kind of bath of oxytocin or some wonderful kind of hormone that just makes you kind of feel better and adds to the sort of overall pleasant feeling in your body. So this is where crafting this kind of plan, it doesn't have to be an impossible journey that people think it might be to do. I think of somebody who is a ministry leader in a nonprofit he's got little kids and he and his wife both work full time. Their life is a little bit bananas at this point. We talked about injecting into his morning a time when he would just stop and sit in a chair and listen to the voice of Jesus for just 2 minutes in the morning. And he did this instead of immediately waking up and looking at his phone. He would take a 10-minute walk around his office building and listen to worship music. At the end of the day, he instituted family dance party every night before dinner.
Oh,
They would put on the music and the whole family would dance and be silly and loud. And it was always such a lift. Like even, especially the days when he would think, I don't feel like doing the dance party. The kids would say, but Dad, we do the dance party. And they would all do it. And he could feel an immediate lift. These are some of the interventions that make a huge difference for people. I think folks get in their heads that it has to be more of a Barbie-style thing, when actually what really counts is figuring out how to have great tasting hormone soup most every day.
I like how you encourage us to plan it and craft it.
Yeah.
Because if we don't have a plan, then absolutely our new habit as of 2008 is going to be going to our phone and checking. As you were talking about it, one of the things that came to mind is I feel like, to keep going with your hormone soup analogy, that is really just throwing in a bunch of spices that are unnecessary to the soup.
Absolutely. Absolutely unnecessary. I mean, you know what's funny is, I'm going to give away my age, but when I was in college, I did an internship at the Library of Congress. I had a friend who was doing it with me. At that time, there was like a copy room, where the big Xerox machine was. And in that copy room was an AP Newswire. Have you ever heard of this? Like that in the 80s, this is how people got their news for their papers. Is this little machine that was spitting out news headlines, like, constantly pouring out this piece of paper. Well, my friend in 1988 was really into the news. He was a news junkie. He would go in between every task, check and read the AP Newswire, and then come out and announce to me what was happening in the world that was alarming.
Oh, gosh.
And I was like, gosh, Jerry, I don't want to know the news this often. And I remember saying to him, nobody wants to hear about the news every hour, Jerry. And it's so ironic now, right? Because I'm like,
that did not age well.
I know everybody's hearing about the news every hour now, unless you are intentional.
Right.
Everybody's hearing about the news every hour. And our dear nervous systems, that's a lot of load to take on. It's just ultimately not good for us. So yeah, I feel like the art of a better break is something that we kind of naturally used to take. I'm thinking of, like, if you went to a doctor's office and they were running late, you just sit there.
Right.
Right. And sort of like deal with yourself, think, or maybe read a little magazine article or something like that. But we don't have, with our smartphones, we've taken away some of those more natural rhythms that were so good for our bodies. And so we have to be intentional, reclaim them. It's not terribly hard to do, but if we're not intentional, you probably won't do it.
I know you've written a book, and we're going to talk about that. I think that your next book needs to be titled The Art of a Better Break. I love that.
Yay. That's good. That would be good.
Yeah. Well, and it's funny, you talked about the gentleman you were working with and how he decided that he was going to get up and have 2 minutes of just quiet time with Jesus. And in my community, we call that be still time. And so every now and then we'll have little challenges where we'll just have some be still time. Yeah. It is a wonderful way to sit and be in the presence of Jesus. What can we learn from Jesus about these soul restoring rhythms? What can we learn from what is documented about him in the Bible?
One of the texts that I've really appreciated in my reflection about all this is the second half of the first chapter of Mark is a great picture of kind of a day in the life of Jesus. He starts off by teaching in the synagogue, and then a demon-possessed man comes and he delivers this demon-possessed man. And I'm thinking, if this were me, I'd be like, job well done, work is finished. But it isn't like that. He goes to Simon's house and heals Simon's mother-in-law. After that, it says the whole town comes to the house where he's staying, and he heals and delivers many people. And so he has a really fast day, or a really full, really busy day. And I really like this about Jesus because it makes his humanity very relatable to me. He had days where he was being interrupted. There was a lot going on. More than he planned was happening. And so this is one of those days. So it's a fast day. So I'm like, okay, there's precedent for having fast days or fast seasons. But then what's really interesting is Jesus in the morning goes to a quiet place to pray. I love this. Immediately after the really full day that goes well into the night, he wakes up early before it's dark. And in that time, he goes and he prays. The disciples come and find him. And they say to him, Jesus, the whole town is gathered again, and everybody's waiting for you. Do you want to do day 2 of this awesome healing and deliverance ministry that you just started? But Jesus says no to that. And he says, I want us to go to the next towns and preach there also, for that is why I came. So while we don't hear what happens in Jesus' prayer time, it seems pretty clear that he gets clarity and discernment about what is his to do in the face of there being this really great option to stay in town and do day 2 of a healing and deliverance ministry, which is what everyone kind of wants him to do and expects him to do. And so I love that we can look at this and see that there are a couple of things at play. After a really full and sort of jam-packed ministry day, Jesus goes away to pray. So he moves fast, but then he slows it down intentionally by taking some quiet time to pray. In that prayer time, it seems like he finds his yeses and his nos in that time. Like what is a no? He's going to say no to the thing that everyone is kind of hoping he's going to do, including his close disciples. And he's going to say yes to going to the next town. My mantra is Jesus moved fast and slow, and Jesus finds his yes and his no. And that following Jesus into those things can make all the difference in whether we become burned out when we're following into the things we feel called to.
That kind of goes back to what you said at the top of our conversation, which is, are we doing what is ours to do?
Right.
And so what I hear you saying is, Jesus spent time in his town and then had the quiet time, went to pray, and then realized that he needed to move on. And so staying there was not his to do that day.
That's right. It's what everyone was hoping was his to do. And I think we face that all the time, don't we? We have tremendous expectation and pressure from people who have all kinds of ideas about what our call should look like or how we should pursue it. At the end of the day, in the face of that pressure, the best space for us to go and find our yeses and noses in the quiet space with Jesus, of listening and praying, trying to get away from all that pressure to really tease out. It's hard not to say yes to the things that would be really great, but aren't ours to do.
I feel like you're just speaking directly to me with with a lot of this, because in this online space, creating content, having a podcast, being an author, trying to do speaking, like there's a lot of things that I really do feel called to do. And in my mind has some other ideas, or other people will say ideas with wonderful, pure intentions, but like, well, you should do this.
Yeah.
But you could do this too. And it's an insatiable, never ending, I don't want to use the word monster, but this online, I don't know what the right word is. It's never enough. I could always be doing more. And I have to check my emotional state and check my own boundaries and where I feel like God is calling me. Even when I'm questioning that, and even when I'm wondering, because there's always something else I could be doing, but maybe that's not all mine to do.
Yep. No, I feel like we have a lot in common, Amy. I call it having professional ADHD, when you're just like, everything sounds so exciting.
Yes.
Doing the spiritual work of knowing, like, there are a lot of things that have an appeal to me, but really getting into, in this season with what I have going on, what makes most sense, what is really mine to do.
Yeah. And I like how you say in this season too. I'm actually entering, or I have, by the time this goes out, entered into a new season of empty nesting. So I am evaluating all kinds of, okay, what makes sense right now to do.
Yeah.
So with regard to our stressors, I mean, I don't think this is like the new thing that that we are told, like eliminate the stressors. You need to work on your stress management. I was just talking with someone whose body is manifesting stress. And they said, if I have one more person tell me that I need to manage my stress, I'm going to flip. And so, and I get it, right? Because we are caretakers. We have demanding jobs. We have traffic. We have children. We have parents. There are some things that we just can't eliminate. I'm wondering what you think of that and how do we navigate that?
Yeah, I'm so with you on that. If your life is stressful because your teenager is having a hard time, that's not eliminatable. Most of us can't just up and quit a job that's stressful. There's got to be some kind of other plan if you're going to do that. I mean, I get frustrated with that message. There are a couple things that come to mind for me in regards to someone really struggling like your friend is and their body is suffering the stresses of life. And if the stresses are in that kind of category of not really being eliminatable, the concepts that we've just been talking about, the hormone soup concepts, will be nothing but helpful to the person like that. It may not fix everything for sure, but it will help. Putting moments in our life that help our body have a better balance of hormone is absolutely a must and essential. And again, it doesn't have to be so hard to do. Now, for a lot of us, I think one thing that can be very helpful to think about is to pull back the camera on a stressful season of your life and to get a bigger picture and look at the bigger rhythms of your year. Because I know in my field that there's nothing really wrong with a busy season or a stressful time, as long as you also have slow seasons or a slow time, right? So moving fast is not terrible for you unless it's unrelentingly and chronic and never stops. So what we can take from that, and the picture of Jesus in Mark 1, I think, is reassuring in that sense. Yes, he moved fast, right? He had that really big ministry day. And then the next morning, he slowed things down. And even by walking to the next town to preach there also, I'm imagining that was kind of a slow day. They walked then the next day. So it shows you that model of fast side by side with slow. One of my really good friends has little kids and they're finishing up Little League and the 75 things they had to do in May for the middle school year end and all this stuff. I'm more like in your phase. I'm an empty nester. But I was just sitting with her saying, oh yeah, like they've just had an incredibly fast season that started near the beginning of May and they're hoping it'll end at the end of baseball season. That's fine, right? But what will become harmful for her and for her family is if they don't do some intentional work in making sure there's a slow season in their summer that follows all this. A lot of people, you do have to be intentional to do it. But after all this ends, don't plan anything for a couple of weeks. Don't fill it all back up with other stuff. Try to help your family have a slow season next to that fast season. If we look not only at our days and how we address hormone soup and create some rhythm in our days, but to pull back the camera, how do we make rhythm in our weeks? Do we do well to examine our Sabbath practice? Are we doing well with that? If May through mid-June is bananas for our family, then what does mid-June to mid-July need to look like? Look at your life. There are these predictable times when you're going to have a fast season. Can you just do well to tend the season before and the season after to make sure you slow back down?
You are speaking my language. Oh. One of the things I have been meditating on and just trying to receive from God this year is a concept, I call it ordinary time. Mm-hmm. So in some of the more traditional Christian churches, like the Catholic Church,
Uh-huh.
there is a liturgical calendar. And you may be aware of this.
Yes.
There's this calendar, and there are some seasons of anticipation, like the season of Advent anticipates Christ's birth.
Mm-hmm.
There is the season of Lent, which does the same thing with Easter. And then there's the season of Easter. There's seasons of anticipation and celebration, and there's a lot going on. There's extra things in the church, and they're all scheduled. And then there's a scheduled season of ordinary time.
I love that. Yes.
Where we still go to church.
Uh-huh.
They're still praising and worshiping and participating in the ritual, but there's not a lot of extra stuff.
Right.
And God's really been working on me this year of like, when is your ordinary time? Because my nature is to do the projects. I love projects. I love working towards something, and it is burning me out. I probably shouldn't say this, but it's, yeah. So anyway, we're recording this a couple months before it'll go live, but I released a book in April and I took May more as ordinary time. Unfortunately, I dropped a few balls in the process of it, but I had to schedule it in. I wanted to go on to the next thing.
Right. Yeah. I love that you did that. That's exactly what I mean. If you've had a huge output, then take a pause before the next big project. I think that is so good for our bodies, spirits, our souls. I often will talk for myself. It's important for me to have slow mornings, are really just wonderful and yummy for me. I love a slow morning, but I do have at least 4 days a week that are not slow mornings. I'm in the office early, first client at 9. And so the morning has a certain clip to it. But there are other days when I can take a slow morning. And when life is kind of crazy and I haven't had one of those, I start to feel it. And I'm like, oh, I know what I need. I need a slow morning. When everything is I can just kind of mosey around and not have to worry about what time it is, have a more leisurely time in prayer, a longer walk, or all those things. I feel my body kind of releasing into that. Whoever is listening to this that feels a nudge from the Holy Spirit, this is stuff you can start planning and doing today that will make a big difference in how you feel overall.
Yeah, I completely agree. I have one other question, because we talked a little bit at the very beginning about our phones, how when we have a break, our natural tendency is to grab our phone and get caught up on Instagram. And I'm raising my hand over here. I mean, I absolutely do that as well. But for better or for worse, these are a part of our lives. Our phones are on there. And so talk to us about how we can navigate using our phone for self-care and how it can relate to what you call that soul restoring self-care.
Yeah. I mean, the thing that is going to be good for most of us is to touch our phones less and spend less time with our phones. Now, at the same time, our phones give us all these wonderful apps like Lectio 365 and Reimagining the Ignatian Examiner apps on my phone that I really love. Help me.
Right.
Jesus. I love being in touch on my family's little group chat. And I use the Marco Polo app to stay in touch with good friends. They're just wonderful blessings that the phone brings. At the end of the day, if I am not careful, I will, there's a horrifying place on your phone where you can check how much screen time you've had on average every day and how many pickups your phone has had. Now, the average, the reports kind of vary, but I did a little research on this for a sermon I did recently. And so I kind of mashed up the research, and I found that the average time we are spending on our days, or on our phones these days, Americans, is 4 hours. 4 hours a day. The average number of pickups for our phones is 90 a day.
I believe it.
So
I bet I do that.
Let me tell you the hilarious thing about this. When I was prepping this sermon and, I'm researching these numbers and I'm writing about how I'm going to talk in this talk about how to bring this to people or how to challenge people about their phones. And I started to feel a little anxious. People may not like this message, like and so I started feeling anxious. And while writing about challenging people about their phone usage, I start to feel anxious. My automatic pilot is completely unconscious. My hand reaches out. I grab my phone. I'm on social media. And before I'm consciously aware, I am watching a video selling a product that you sort of smear on your face and then you slowly peel it up. And then one pore by pore, it pulls a whitehead, out of the pore, right? Really slowly. And so it's like I'm feeling kind of nauseous and I can't stop watching it, because it's just like what?
It's fascinating.
Gross, I'm dumping stress hormone into my body by grossing myself out and being tempted, like maybe I need this product. Maybe I need to pull all this stuff out of my pores, right? So all this stress is going into my body. And I suddenly wake up and realize, oh my gosh, what just happened? Well, that's what happens to us 90 times a day. I mean, I feel anxious. And the way I soothe myself is by automatically distracting myself with something that ends up bringing more stress hormone into my body. So it became like an illustration to me. If I'm conditioned now to soothe myself like that, and it's so counterproductive, it doesn't soothe at all. It does a couple of things. It makes more stress hormone in my body, which overall is going to make me feel worse. But it also disrupted my prep time so that my prep was less efficient and had this direct correlation to the time that week then I would have with a sense of margin. It was directly related to how well and efficiently I prepared this talk. I'm realizing if I grab my phone and watch videos every 2 minutes while I'm prepping, it's going to take hours to prep this. The phone is a very real challenge. And I think that all of us do well to give ourselves, monthly check-ins on, okay, how's my phone usage going? And what does a meaningful challenge mean? Because if I am turning to my phone 90 times a day, what would it be like if I turned to Jesus 90 times a day?
Yeah.
What would my life change? If I'm spending 4 hours a day on my phone, what if I was spending 4 hours a day encouraging myself in the Lord? These things really do convict me, and it makes it easier to decide for 3 small interventions in my day that might help me represent me turning to Jesus, that would give me happy hormone in order to balance out the onslaught that's coming at me otherwise. I feel for all of us because there are millions of people whose full-time jobs it is to try to get us to stay on their apps more.
For sure.
And so we got a lot of powers and principalities influencing this whole thing. It's huge, systemic, very difficult to address. That's why I feel like we all do well to come back to examining that part of our lives, our phone usage regularly, because it has a direct impact on our well-being. Habitual things like when I feel anxious, what do? I'd actually rather turn to Jesus in that moment, and be reassured, like, this is a word I have for these people. Go ahead.
Right. And being aware too. I feel like that's the number one thing. Yeah. Being aware. Okay. So you have this book that is out called Restore My Soul, Reimagining Self-Care for a Sustainable Life. I would love to hear what inspired you to write it.
It's science. And like I said, there comes a time in a session, no matter what we're working on, where we say, how are you going to start feeling better tomorrow? In those conversations, I recognized that it seems like there are 4 critical realms of self-care that I keep talking about over and over again with clients. It's the realm of your thoughts. How do you deal with your thoughts and self-care in that area? The realm of your emotions. Do you deal well with your emotional life? And that is a realm of self-care. And then the rhythms and things like hormone soup are a part of that. The last one is fulfillment. I really strongly believe that if we are not experiencing fulfillment most days of our life, we run the risk of becoming burned out. Being able to stay aligned with our call and make sure that we're doing things in most of our days that feel really aligned to that is mission critical for this overall kind of life sustainable self-care that I'm trying to put out into the world. So yeah, I think the book, in these 4 realms, it's got a chapter on why this realm is important, and then a chapter on how do you do anything about it. And the how chapters have skill after skill that you just learn and start practicing. And so I really love to imagine people using it as almost like a manual of sorts that they might pull off the shelf regularly, bone up on different sets of skills that feel particularly important in different seasons of life, because it's all those realms. I feel like all of us do well to address each of them in some way, the realm of thoughts, emotions, rhythms, and fulfillment. If you have all those going well, it's going to make a big difference in your life.
Yeah. I love how you pulled those out, spit all four of them out. That sounds quite profound. I love that you wrote it for your clients. I wrote my first book, actually both of my books, for my clients as well.
Oh, yeah.
So I get that desire to hand them something that would help their walk in whatever it is. So obviously we have different, but somewhat similar, because I'm resonating so much with what you're talking about. Janice, I have a few questions I like to ask all my guests.
Oh, sure.
So I want to run through these real quickly. One is, I am fascinated by tattoos. I love learning about them because I have found that when people choose to put something on their body for the rest of their life, they often have a meaning. So I was wondering, if you have a tattoo, what is it and what's the meaning behind it? And if you don't, but you had to get one, what would it be and where would it go?
I love this question. I do not have a tattoo in this season of my life. And I'm not, because I can't predict, if this would be meaningfully, meaningful for me over the decades. It's a little hard for me to commit to the tattoo, but the image of the sheep and shepherd in the scriptures shapes my book. I've been deep in it in the last years. And I love John 10 talks about the metaphor of the sheep and the shepherds. And it says, after he's gathered his flock, he walks ahead of them and they follow him because they know his voice. They won't follow a stranger. They will run from him because they don't know his voice. This is a part of John 10, and he runs with this metaphor throughout. And so I think my tattoo, Amy, would be a little sheep and a shepherd's crook that kind of goes around the sheep somehow.
Oh,
yeah. And I think, because I love this idea of the sheep are so tuned in to the shepherd's voice, and they know it, and they don't follow strangers. They follow Jesus. This is what I want. I want to be that dialed in to Jesus' voice in my life. And I think if I got one, I'd want it on my wrist facing me so I could notice it and see it a lot. And then it would remind me, you are a sheep and there's a good shepherd speaking to you.
I love that. That's awesome. Janice, tell people how they can connect with you and where they can get your book.
Oh, sure.
Restore My Soul. Yeah.
You can get Restore My Soul on Amazon, or Nav Press, my publisher. You can get it there. You can get it kind of anywhere you buy books. I would love for you guys to get that in your hands and start practicing soul restoring self-care now. I also have a resource related to that hormone soup metaphor. And it's 50 self-care ideas that take 5 minutes or less. You can get this resource at hormonesoupresource.com. So that's hormonesoupresource.com. And there you'll get my PDF that has 50 self-care ideas and walks you through making your own plan for your own hormone soup renewing. I hope everybody will download that and make their own plan like we've been talking about today.
That's great. I love that. I have a download that I call a menu, and which I think is what you're doing. It's not a real menu. It's like non-gym ways to take care of your health.
Ooh,
but it's a menu. Do what you want. I love the 50 self-care ideas. That's a menu of what works for you. Great.
Yeah.
I know you have threaded scripture throughout our conversation, but do you have one particular meaningful Bible verse that you would like to share?
Later in John, beyond the verse, I was just reading John 10:10. The thief's purpose is to steal and kill and destroy, but my purpose is to give you a rich and satisfying life. And that I love. Jesus came to rescue us for ultimate hope and eternal life. But Jesus is also really interested in our life now being one where we are not overly swayed or pulled by the thief who comes to kill and steal and destroy, but he wants us to have a rich and satisfying life in this life as well. And that's, so meaningful to me and so inspiring to me and so characteristic of Jesus' heart for us. And it's what I'm about and what I'm hoping to be helping people find as they're trying to move from overwhelm and fatigue and burnout and into soul restoring self-care and really pressing into their own callings.
Rich and satisfying life. I mean, I think that's what we're all looking for. Sure.
Yes.
Okay, Janice, I'm going to give you the last word. What is the one simple thing you would like us to remember about our conversation?
That self-care does not have to be so hard. The best of self-care is daily and doable. And that's what I want people to remember.
That's great. Okay, that is all for today. Go out there and have a graced day. In the spirit of regulating our nervous system, I would like to remind you in today's Age with Grace and Strength tip that it is okay if you miss a workout. And in fact, I would encourage you, if you are feeling tired or stressed, or you feel like that nervous system is just on high alert, perhaps we take today's workout, we set it aside, and we instead have what I like to call be still time. This is something we have practiced in our community over the years, and it's basically sitting, maybe outside, maybe inside, with God, without a list of praises or prayers or anything else, but we're just sitting in the presence of God. You'd be surprised at how this can fill your soul, how it can downshift your stress level, and just taking that time to sit with God can do so much for your body and soul and mind. If you were needing permission, there it is. All right, see you next week. Hey, I'm so glad you've tuned in today. Thank you. A quick note before we go. This podcast has over 400 episodes and is on a journey of growth and evolution, just like all of us. Some episodes before January 2024 may contain references to diet culture or perspectives that don't fully align with our current approach to health and wellness from a weight-neutral, intuitive eating perspective. So, listen with a discerning ear, take what serves you, and leave the rest. Thanks for understanding and for growing with us on this journey.